Right. Greg, looks like the first item is yours.
Sure thing. So this just came up in regards to the latest security release announcement that went out yesterday for some upcoming Envoy CVEs. Just curious who has permissions to post to the announcements channel on discuss.io. Because I know, luckily, Jacob Delgado has access for posting, but I'm wondering who has the powers to post, and more importantly, who has the powers to add or remove people for being able to post to that subject category.
Give me one sec, because myself, Mitch, and Craig Box has been working on transferring a lot of these permissions over to CNCF, and discuss.io is one of those items. I'm looking up on the tracking sheet here.
Yeah, I know on the community sheet we don't have discourse talked at all about there, or discuss.istio.io talked about it all.
Oh, never mind. The issue I was thinking about was a completely different one. It's about re-enabling OAuth on it. So no, this is not on the list of things. Who used to have access?
Well, I know, like I said, Jacob Delgado has access right now, but I'm not sure who else has access or who has permission to add or remove people.
Okay, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll find out.
Okay, all right, perfect.
It's probably one of these accounts that after folks left Google, it was just left ownerless. So we have an internal process to claim owners. All right, so next item is mine. So with the recent Purple Iguana CVE, Envoy CVE, the security working group is looking at RM sign up for it. So for the last couple of releases for CVE, Google has taken this up, and I think this release Solo is taking ownership of it, and we're proposing a quarterly rotation for the major vendors to have an RM on staff, essentially on call, to handle this type of CVE releases. That's separate from the Istio release, because the Istio release is more of a by schedule, whereas CVE releases are somewhat random as they come in. So this is just a general announcement for the folks that are on this call from one of the vendors in the early disclosure list. Please come to the security working group session and discuss the CVE RM rotation sign. The sign-up itself is tracked using the same spreadsheet as a regular RM rotation. So that is my announcement there. Next item is Keith.
Hey, so I wanted to discuss the Istio feature status taxonomy, or the feature stage taxonomy, rather. I've been doing some digging, trying to get some understanding and start some discussions around how features in Istio are organized as part of some work I'm doing for, along with Costin and Ben, to create an Istio safe mode. The biggest, question that I've got about this feature list here, I was able to track down where this was generated from, the YAML file. But what's interesting to me is that there doesn't seem to be any sort of indication of, or any correlation between the features listed here and the way that those features are expressed via different custom resources or different fields or different mesh config values, to get a sense of, okay, what are the actual scenarios that are being enabled or that are accessible in Istio, and how do users go about enabling those scenarios. So I wanted to kind of see if anybody had any similar comments here, and to see if we can maybe get some clarity clarity from this, because when I look at, for example, TLS termination support, and it's not supporting gateways, like I know that it says stable, but what CRDs are behind that? What if there is a setting within that I need for SNI, and that setting is an ENV bar? That's not really stable. So can anybody kind of comment on that interplay? Yeah, that's my question.
Kit, I think there are two completely different things we're discussing here. We have also, CRDs with beta and annotations and clear indication of the stability of the field in the CRD. So if a CRD is beta, it assumes that it's clearly supported and it's at a beta or stable level. When we say that we support gRPC, for example, it means that gRPC, you can use gRPC or HTTPS or SNI or whatever, as long as you use APIs that are beta. That's my interpretation of this, of the two different, API level, and then there is protocol level. Does it make sense to other people? Is there any other possible interpretation of alpha versus beta in APIs?
Yeah, that makes sense. The current list of features kind of seems to group them together. I guess my clarification is around how those things interplay. So it sounds like your interpretation, Costin, is that the guarantees on the features page only hold true if you're using APIs that also correlate to that support level. So if it says beta and you happen to use an annotation or AMB bar related to that feature, then you can fall out of that beta support, like that beta propagation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we also document annotations which are stable and alpha. So for annotation, we also have a page somewhere where it says the list of annotation has an indication if it's alpha or beta. So it's kind of the same thing. And for environment variables, I don't remember any time where we claim that an environment variable is a beta API or if it's something that is guaranteed to be supported. If anyone if any find any doc where environment variables are treated as are documented as stable API, and then we need to fix it as soon as possible because it's.
Okay, got it. That's really helpful. So I guess my follow-up question is there a current page or view or way to be able to see the interaction between all of those things? Because as it stands, if I want to figure out if there's a particular thing I want to accomplish, I've got to go and check the feature status and then check the API and then check the particular way that this thing's enabled. I got to tie all those threads myself. Is there any way to kind of get, from a tutorial or from a demo or from a page on the docs, able to see, okay, what is I guess it's just the highest thing up on the stack then, like whether it's the annotation of an API or whatever, like whatever thing you're using, that's the support level for it, I guess is what you're saying.
So Keith, I think you're looking for a way to essentially pull that status without having to piece together based on this.
Potentially, yes, because that's what I'm trying to do for safe mode, right? If we want to say, okay, here are the safe or production ready Istio features, I can look at this and say, okay, yeah, traffic routing is stable, but if I pull randomly out of mesh config like non-trusted proxies, something that I've been running into lately, what's the support level for that given that it's mesh config? Is it still stable? So just before, just assuming how my brain works, I want to just kind of ask the general group if there's an existing way of reading about these interactions.
I'm not entirely sure what is the reason you are looking at this page instead of looking at the API page, because from a user perspective, assuming you install the safe Istio that you describe, all the user can do is interact with API. So we don't have any other kind of user with Istio interaction except the APIs, as far as I know. So as long as and the criteria for APIs to graduate to beta, it's they have enough testing, the underlying feature is stable, and the user can do the CR, go to the CR and do whatever it's described as the documentation in the CR. So I'm not entirely sure. I never understood this page, to be honest. I mean, I have the same problem with you, but from my perspective, since the API is only interactions between user and Istio, I think that kind of trumps this page, and it's really. And please don't look at tutorials and documentation, because the tutorials are full of experimental features, and they almost never make a disclaimer that, hey, use this tutorial, but it's not a stable, or it's an experimental feature, or it's not really tested.
So if this page is causing confusion, is it fair to say what we actually want is a clearly document matrix of here's the combinations of features and APIs and so on that has been tested and is known to be stable, and then everything else is used at your own risk?
I mean, that's one approach. Go ahead, Cotton, sorry.
Yeah, we kind of have it. I mean, if you look at the reference documentation, we have, CRDs are defined as beta and so forth.
Yeah, so the matrix of stable features is one option. I think to your point, Costin, the first question I asked is, okay, what is a feature in Istio? And when the place when I Googled that question, like Istio feature, that's the page that comes up. If the idea is that the only features in Istio are the APIs, because that's the only interaction point, then that page doesn't really serve any purpose, and in fact, it sort of makes it more ambiguous, the actual support status of any given scenario. And so, if that's the case, like if that's the stance that the Istio community is going to take, then I'd much rather prefer for the reference pages that describe the various Istio APIs to have clearly specified support levels for each. For the relevant for major fields and things like that, because like you said, there are annotations that are alpha. There are everything in there are various levels of kind of support within mesh config, just as an example. So like there feels like there needs to be some clarity here, so user can know how stable these things are.
Kit, I want to clarify, because I think I misspoke or I was not clear. The only interaction between a user of Istio and Istio is the API. But there is also, as an admin of Istio, as a vendor that is configuring Istio, then you have multi-cluster, you have CNI, you have different components that you can configure for Istio. And for that, the feature page does have some relevance. For example, multi-network, it's not expressed through the API. You just use the API, service, deploy service, or whatever, and you have multiple clusters of topology or something. And that may be supported stable, alpha, or whatever. So I don't want to confuse the user view and the Istio manager view.
I think I struggle to see the difference there, because if you take multi-cluster, like you said, I think, I haven't looked at it in a while, but I think the Istio CTL remote secret CLI tool that you often see used with multi-cluster is still under an X flag, an experimental. Could be wrong about that, but it was, at least for a bit. And
for good reasons. For good reasons. I mean, it's not. It still has a number of problems that are not fixed, but and it's not the only way to set up multi-cluster. So there are different ways to set multi-cluster. We are saying that if you create the secrets somehow and you use the APIs, the multi-cluster will work. I think multi-cluster is beta level now.
Right, and that's my point, right? Like if it feels, at least to me, from when I was setting up Istio multi-cluster for the first time, that's what went into my brain, right? The multi-cluster is a beta, I think a beta feature, but this tool that's used everywhere in the documentation telling me how to do multi-cluster is experimental. Now, in my case, I JRigged it myself in Terraform to create the secret in some way, but that's not, and so that's, I'll take things into my own hands. But it's that this is the reason for safe mode, right? That all the guys, the documentation for how to get about achieving the scenario from upstream Istio, using potentially experimental flags, it doesn't feel congruent to me. It feels off.
I can tell you in Google, we have some custom way to set up multi-cluster where it's integrated, it's better. So we don't use Istio X to set up multi-cluster in managed product. And that's probably common, going to be common for most vendors because you have specific authentication. So that's something that's, the manager of Istio needs to figure out and to integrate with the platform with Terraform, as you said, and other tooling. And Istio X, I know, I'll let other people comment. Sorry, I probably spoke too much.
Is it is it fair to say that what we need is some sort of thing saying like, look, if there's a way to use a stable feature without any experimental stuff, then it's could be considered stable. But if there's still something like Keith was saying, like, oh, this is a stable feature, but it turns out the only way to actually use it is by using this experimental thing because we missed something or didn't track that, then we can't call that thing stable, that feature, quote unquote, stable. And features don't really exist, right? Like I think like Gus is saying, there's sort of an expression of what you can do with the APIs, but like as long as there is a way to configure something with only stable, a way to configure a feature with only stable APIs and tools, then we can say that that feature is stable. And if there isn't, we don't, right? Is that a reasonable standard? Is that what we're saying, or we're saying something else?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, if the install of Istio can be done in a safe way, but that's something the vendor can also kind of interact with. So it doesn't have to be a way to install it in Istio open source to do something. Maybe there are other ways that are platform specific, so we cannot test and so forth.
Right, but I mean, if Istio itself declares that this is stable, does that mean that there must be a stable Istio specific way to do it? Or would we just say, look, you can do this, but we can't make any guarantees about it because Istio itself does not offer a stable way to do this? That's kind of where, to me, it gets weird, right? You have to kind of make a distinction if you want to make a claim about, if Istio, the project, wants to make a claim about stability.
So Ben,
Right,
if I
so
understood you, Ben, if I understood you correctly,
Go ahead, Frank.
go ahead, Eric.
Okay, so one comment I wanted to make is, I think this whole problem is what we tried to solve in the past. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd have to go back and look at what Brian's points were on this. The whole point. So originally we had, I think this was pretty much a hard formatted chart in the docs. So anybody could go in the docs and change anything, to whatever they wanted to. And I think, the docs team basically relied on somebody to say yes or no to that. I assume the TOC for the most part. But what Brian, I think, tried to do at one point in time was to, he came up with this feature template and said, basically, here's what it is. Here's what it means to be, of the various levels, experimental, alpha, beta, whatever. And the idea at the time was that they created these for a number of the features and tried to fill some out. There's a whole bunch of PRs out there for ones that aren't in the list. Or I think Miriam was maybe just trying to fill out templates for those that were already in the list to make sure they somewhat matched. But that effort, so I think there was an effort made to sort of identify, at least from a table, and I don't know whether the table, format is good or bad, that may be up for discussion. But I think at least there was an idea of how to identify which, what things were needed for a feature to be listed at a various level. And I don't know that there was ever anything that was really done to say, wow, that feature, multi-cluster, for example, here, really should be at what it said it was at based on the table. I think the plan was to do that, but before that happened, Brian left, and I think that work sort of, didn't get completed. So maybe we need to look at completing that work or doing something similar to that. Or maybe, we just come up with some other idea on how to do this to make sure that, we have a good way to understand what the requirements are and have these various features follow that standard.
I think, Austin's point about the integrate, like the installation versus the user, that's a nuance. There's lots of nuances here. And whenever you're trying to summarize, a singular status for a feature with all the nuances of whether it's an installation feature or whether it's a user feature, whether you're using APIs or environmental variables or what, it's going to be really hard to do it and be 100% accurate. So Eric, I agree with your point. Maybe we got to try to summarize this and maybe split it a little bit, like the installation versus the user split might be a good one. So maybe we need to split it a little bit, but we could be splitting it infinite number of ways with all the nuances if we're not careful.
But with all this confusion and all this stuff, one thing is constant. A beta API is supposed to be beta, and user can use a beta and could trust that it will not break and will not change in future. Everything else, I think we can debate, but I think that's kind of the minimum thing that the user should expect. That any beta API is passing some tests and it's usable. Do we have consensus at least on this?
Go ahead.
No, any objections to this statement that beta APIs are kind of the golden standard for both Istio, Gamma API, Gateway API, and pretty much all the APIs provided by virtually everyone?
Yeah, and I think based on your the stake in the ground, we ought to tie that page in some way back to the APIs better, for sure. But yeah, your statement makes absolute sense.
I was just going to comment. You had said that a beta API won't change, but technically that's not true, right? In practice we haven't done that, but we should have, and I think we've been poor about moving things through the process of getting them to be called, stable APIs, but generally, I think we can change a beta, right?
Yeah, beta plus, with this caveat that we may make small changes to V1, of course.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, just because you had said that, I just want to make sure that we weren't, because in practice we haven't done that, but I think we should make ourselves able to do it.
Yeah, in practice we didn't change from alpha to beta because of various reasons, and the infrastructure doesn't allow us to actually make changes, so it's kind of, we are both right.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Wait, so from beta to stable API, is there an opportunity to change the shape of those APIs? Sounds
Not
like the
really.
answer is yes.
The answer is no, yes and no. Yes, it officially is that we are allowed, but technically we don't have any way to do it because of the way alpha, beta, and Kubernetes and ossification and all the other stuff. And as John said, we cannot even change from alpha to beta in practice. We can hide fields, undocument them, but in reality, the proto is the same across all of them.
Yeah, it might be nice to, if we were a little bit more diligent about how we handle the APIs, if we were able to give ourselves a little bit more latitude going forward. But I understand that historically that has made that difficult for us to do practically now.
Okay, so to summarize, sounds like we have two options, and correct if I'm wrong. So option 2, which is the one that Ben proposed, is essentially we document a sort of a golden path, mix of features and APIs, and we call these the official support paths, and everything else is tried on your own. And then there was the idea that I think Keith proposed originally, having this supported matrix detailing the combinations of test and stable features and APIs. Did I summarize it correctly?
Yeah, sounds good. And also, Kit mentions that there is a document about safe Istio mode, and probably that can be used as a driver to kind of clarify a bit more, especially if we put ambient into picture as well, as we discussed.
So I think either option involves documenting what we have tested. In the past, how have we done this? Because it just someone take the lead here and then create a new set of docs and deprecate some other docs, and then we test it in the community doc testing phase.
I mean, everything in beta is tested, and I think also everything on this document is tested. It's just a matter of refactoring the documents to be more clear about. I mean,
Okay.
linking to the docs. I don't think we need additional testing. Just
Yeah, I'm not even 100% sure that a full matrix is necessary. I think, as was said in the chat, I think a minimum next step for this would just be to link to relevant APIs on that features table. And then option 2, I think that if safe mode, we can get that in a good spot and actually implement that. I think that's what safe mode is. I don't know if it's necessarily like an option 1, option 2, or like a step 1, step 2 is how I see it in my mind.
Okay, so what's the follow-up action here? Do we just create an issue and then ping the community and see if I have volunteers to update these pages? So I don't believe we have a dedicated document team of any kind.
I can start. Yeah, I can create an issue for just to make it public, and this is already stuff I plan to do for safe mode anyway.
Right.
So,
So note that these pages, that whole table is generated by a features.yaml file in the Istio enhancements repo. So if you go look in Istio enhancements, right, that sort of drives what, the process that we use that Brian set up, as well as that features YAML is part of that repo. And all the docs do is basically display what's in that YAML file.
yeah, I think.
So
go ahead. Sorry, I thought you were done.
No, so all I was going to say is, so I think whatever we do, we just want, I mean, we could certainly change the docs to, do something else. But if we can do something in that repo to, lay out what this, what we need to do. Now, maybe we change that YAML file to add another column for something, whatever. I think it would make sense to, further document this, probably in that repo, and then, make whatever changes we need to make. And then, if we change that YAML, we can change the docs and how we display it.
Yeah, that's what I was actually envisioning, is that maybe a new YAML field for relevant APIs and start there. But that's getting into implementation. Go ahead, Tossin, sorry.
Yeah, I have one more point to make in response to Francis, actually, about how we test this. And I think we need to be very clear, and everyone should understand that for beta APIs and for the stable features, we perform tests, and we have automated tests, we have qualification, we have plenty of stuff. But all those tests are done in a specific environment, or maybe in 2 environments. So we have the default installation of Istio, or whatever the CI/CD is doing, and the environment variables are set by the automated test, and that's the configuration that is considered to be beta and tested and stable. If you go and change any random subset of environment variables or install options or whatever that is not part of the kind of safe mode equivalent in the test suite, then the test is invalid, because you are changing the semantics of how authentication is done and a lot of other things. So we need to be very careful. Basically, I think the safe mode that he described should match 99% with the configuration that is under test, and to be very clear that any change to that configuration will invalidate the safety of Istio and also the stability of the APIs, because again, if it doesn't have a test in that configuration, it's not tested.
All right. So coming back to follow up next steps. So Keith, you create the ticket tracking essentially updating the features like YAML at this point, right?
Yep.
Okay. Anything else on this specific topic? If not, let's move on to next one. So Daniel, release qualification testing. Is this the set of tests that Sam Nasser used to run?
Yeah, just kind of wondering what the plan is there since Sam's no longer part of
So-
Google. And
I have a plan. So before Sam left, I asked him to document the steps in a handover document, and our RM, release manager at Google, he has graciously accepted to pick this up. And he is currently out of office on sick leave, but once he's back, I will have him run these tests. I'll add him first to the Purple Iguana channel because it seems like that's where we need this the most currently. And he should be back later this week.
okay, and are we going to have a point of contact for the release managers, or are you going to be the?
I'd be happy to coordinate there. I can also add them to every release channel going forward, including the security CVE channels that I'm a member of.
All right.
When in doubt, you can always just ping me.
Not sure how feasible or possible it would be to make it so the release managers are able to kick those off, but I know they're pretty internal in Google. It would be nice from
So-
a release manager aspect to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And this is one of the things on the CNCF transfer list in terms of test infrastructure transfer, that the goal that I have eventually is to make it possible for anyone in the community, at least release managers in the community, to kick off these tests. We're not quite there yet.
Okay, I just want to make sure there was a plan because I hadn't heard anything.
So let's say that we're working on a plan.
Okay.
Okay. Any other topics? All right. If not, then let's everybody have 20 minutes back. Thank you, and I will talk to you later.
Thanks. Bye.